Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. I'm hoping you guys are all having a fantastic day. So in today's video, as you can tell by the title, we'll be talking about a unprecedented polar vortex. That is not in my own exaggerated words, but in the words of the National Weather Service themselves. They are calling this a polar vortex, and indeed it is. Some of these anomalies, especially as you get across the southeastern United States, will be reaching 20-25 degrees below average. In other words, there might be some records being broken and some snow flying around cities as far south as Atlanta, Georgia. So I apologize, I haven't been making as many videos lately. I have been very busy, but also, if I'm being honest, the weather has continuously been a little disappointing. However, as we now are approaching fall and winter, and most of the audience on here watches me for my winter storms anyways, and that's what I feel the most motivated to talk about, I will be making more videos. And right now the long range forecast is beginning to become more and more exciting, but for today we will be mainly focusing on this Arctic outbreak of cold air, which it really is. So it may sound a little ridiculous to be talking about it in November. Notice that right now what we have going on across the United States is a system. We've had several series of these Alberta Clipper type systems, and they aren't really quite, because they originate a little further north, but they've been traveling along the jet stream, which has been positioned right along the border of the US and Canada, and it's been sending these low pressures down through the map, into the Great Lakes, into the St. Lawrence River Valley, and producing snow mainly across the Canadian side of our viewing area, and across the south it's been mainly rain, even some severe weather across portions of inland and northeast there the last few days. And what we're going to be seeing is nothing else but another one of these little guys moving in on Saturday. As you can see right here with my cursor, I'm highlighting a potential little threat that does look very insignificant at first. And this is, again, pretty much today at midnight, and I'm recording this video and releasing it on the 7th of November. And what we are seeing is a stout low pressure that is very weak, but it begins to intensify, and it's very compact, it's very small. And by the way, you could see already the beginning of this system in the satellite view up above, where we have that spinning area. You could see kind of that little bit of rotation right across the border of northern Montana into southern Canada, and that's going to be the system that we're going to be watching for. Notice a large deck of stratus is stretching across Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa. It's kind of that white shield of clouds that you see. And I briefly looked out my window because earlier today it was completely sunny here, and now indeed there is a deck of stratus clouds, which that has brought in. So notice that by tomorrow at around noontime, so you're going out to brunch Saturday, we have a system that is delivering most likely snow. The GFS has been arguing with the European model on this system for quite a while. This began appearing around Monday, so it's definitely something that has been pretty well forecasted in terms of the placement of the system. And if you might assume what the biggest difference between the models was, basically the GFS showed a lot more snow to this and the European a lot less. And the GFS has resolutely been steadfast in its showing of quite a bit of snow, while the European at first showed all rain, and now it's beginning to trend a little bit more towards the snowy side. Probably won't be as snowy as what the GFS shows here, but it is going to be more snowier than the European, which I'll show you in just a little bit. And that is because some of the high resolution models, which go out to 18 to 24 hours, very short time, but they're more accurate in the short term obviously, are agreeing more with the GFS. So notice that where it is going to be occurring during the night, especially early morning hours across Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, it will be mainly forming and falling as snow. It will be chilly, but not that cold, right? Where, portions of southern Iowa will still be seeing rain out of this. Do note that we begin seeing the system transition more into a rainy, wintry mix as it approaches Chicago, so the snowflakes will be more of an early season novelty as opposed to anything of significance in terms of travel. And that will be around probably the late afternoon hours for Chicago. The GFS shows here 12 a.m. It's probably a little too slow with this system. It will probably be out of here a little quicker than that. And do note though that the cold air sweeping in behind this, we basically have a upper level low that originated across central southern Canada, and it's right there. It may not seem significant, but the European and GFS swing it pretty much straight down. So note that as I play this in the future, it just goes, this little feature moves its way into the central United States. It's more present on the European model, and that is a component that is interesting, and I'll talk about more in a little bit. But notice that as this system approaches Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, it brings more snowfall with it, as again it would be occurring more towards the coldest time of the day, so right before sunrise. And we see this system kind of riding up that jet stream, but behind it again, the main story is this cold, cold, cold air. And earlier when I was saying that little feature of disturbance that I was talking about, it's going to be important because there's going to be lake effect behind it. And because of all the warm air that is still around on the lakes and the warm water itself, is going to be replaced by really, really cold air coming from the north. So the differentials in terms of height, the temperatures are going to be going from, right at the surface in the 40s and 50s, the lake temperatures, to potentially 25 degrees below 0 Celsius at a very high latitude. And that is basically perfect for lake effect snow creation. And what we have here is these bands of snow that are going to potentially have very convective, maybe even some thunder out of them, because that's how strong this cold front is and how early on it is. The warm waters allow for this to potentially take on more of a convective nature. And basically, for my friends in Chicago, I'm based out of Chicago, there is a talk between the models, right? So the GFS shows the lake effect snow band skimming portions of Chicago and going mainly into Indiana and Michigan, but that is not what the European model shows. I will show you the whole progression of this system with the European model, which I have pulled up in just a second, but since we're talking about the lake effect, I want to show you. If you recall, I mentioned that there's going to be a little feature here across central Ontario that the European especially picks up on. It's just a little lobe of cold air, but it sends itself straight down, and it's a lot more present on the European than the GFS, which is where that difference comes from. So notice that the European has that little, it almost looks like a little kink, like a little nook in the jet stream there, not jet stream, in the, I guess, in the wind field. And what this allows for it to happen is that the lake effect snow bands that normally would be hitting more of Indiana and Michigan allow briefly to veer themselves more onto the western shores of Lake Michigan, so affecting potentially Wisconsin and Illinois. And you can see right there, boom, into around late Sunday, early Monday across Chicago. I know I have a lot of viewers from there. There could be a brief 1 to 2 inches of snowfall that will fall. And that will not be the system snow from this little guy way over here. It will be the lake effect. So that's something interesting to keep an eye on for. Some snowfall amounts show even into the 5 to 6 inch range. That is probably not going to happen, but we will have to wait and see, as with lake effect there is very high uncertainty. Let me go back now and show you how the European plays the system out and not just focus on the lake effect. Notice that, again, it has that very similar Alberta Clipper type disturbance. This one actually is more of an Alberta Clipper as it kind of originates there. And do note that it keeps it a lot more rain than GFS, right? So that's what I was talking about. The European has a lot more rain here. Again, there's that feature further north you could see going straight down, which is going to determine where, lake effect ends up effectively. Do note, though, it does begin showing a little bit more snow as it hits Michigan, Indiana, and as it crosses the St. Lawrence River Valley into Canada on the day Sunday, it does show snow, just like the GFS. As the title of this video alludes to, the main thing with this will be cold. It will be very, very cold, and this is the temperature anomaly footprint on Sunday. And this is earlier on Saturday. Notice how quickly this cold air swoops in from relatively balmy temperatures across the south-southeast above average to really, really, really cold. And as this air mass and this system kind of acts as a atmospheric pump of cold air, this becomes more anomalous as it moves further south because the averages are higher down there. So notice, by Monday, November 10th, we are approaching some very, very cold temperatures here in terms of the anomalies, and this goes down all the way down into Florida. It's funny, some of these areas will probably be chillier than further up north where we have a heat wave going on. Let's take a look at some of these 2-meter temperature shaded readings. In the overnight hours, you could see potentially 30s going down all the way into Florida, widespread 20s into the deep south, and we have potentially 40s and 50s as far north as Montana into Alberta and Manitoba or Saskatchewan. So this is definitely going to be a flip-flop of weather patterns, to say the least. And in terms of the severity of the cold, both models agree on that. You can see the GFS shows very, very cold temperatures far south, just like the European model, and the anomaly is also absolutely incredible. So now, to finish off the video, I briefly want to show you the high resolution model, the HER model. It's a short range model, but it gives us a lot of detail, and I want to track with you this system. So the HER model, it sometimes likes to be a little bit more aggressive with the snowy side of things, especially if it's further out, and in this case we still are a little further out. But you can see that I have reason to believe that the European model may be underestimating some of the system snow across, say, Michigan or Indiana, or into portions even of Iowa and Illinois. So notice there's our system, there's our little clipper, there's our departing one, and we have essentially, yes, it riding along that jet stream. It's intensifying pretty quickly. By 3 a.m. today, 4 a.m., 5 a.m., when everyone's sleeping, Sioux Falls, Sioux City, into northeastern Iowa there, southeastern South Dakota, we will be, I meant to say northwestern Iowa, we will be looking at a pretty good thud of snow most likely. Again, this is not that far out at this point, so with the HER model showing this much snow, I would say that's probably going to happen. And do note that it shows widespread snow similar to what the GFS did across Iowa. Only across Illinois and Wisconsin does it start transitioning into more rain, as again, it's around a 4 or 5 p.m. time frame. If you recall, the GFS showed more of that precipitation around a midnight time. It's probably going to be a little faster. And then do note that most of this low kind of intensity precipitation across Wisconsin does convert into snow, but as this approaches and kind of rounds the border between Illinois and Indiana, it begins to intensify, and we get even a little bit of convective nature here across Indiana. So potentially northern Indiana, extreme southern Chicago with the heavier precipitation. It's sometimes a phenomenon where you have really borderline temperatures of 35, 34 degrees, and you have a cold rain coming down, and if it comes down with a fast enough intensity, it brings down cold air with it, and it causes a change over to snow. Whereas in other areas that are identical with light precipitation falling, it's still rain. So note that may be happening across northern Indiana into Michigan, and then look, it takes the system into Detroit, potentially delivering several inches of heavy snow into the early morning hours of Sunday, and this would be falling during the coldest time of the day, so 8 a.m., 7 a.m., which is definitely why I believe that this is a possibility. And then do notice that the lake effect bands go absolutely crazy there, so we'll have to wait and see what the high resolution models show with regards to that. So in regards to the snowfall accumulations, you could see that the HER model really does show a decent stripe of snow across the Dakotas of potentially 1 to 2 inches, intensifying it around that western portion of Iowa with maybe even 3 to 4 inches. And then as you get closer into southeastern Michigan, northwestern Ohio, and northeastern Indiana, we potentially see as much as 6 inches according to the HER. That probably won't happen. Even if we do see a scenario that plays out exactly like this, that will be a very heavy wet snow. This is assuming a liquid 10-to-1 liquid ratio, which would be occurring in colder temperatures, not one where it's borderline changing over to snow. So this is probably closer to a 6-to-1 or 7-to-1 ratio, which would effectively cut those amounts into the 3 to 4 inch range, which wouldn't be unbelievable for that to happen across Michigan this time of the year, but definitely way more aggressive than, say, even the GFS or the European model. Upon looking at the National Weather Service forecast for potentially areas like Iowa and to the Dakotas, it seems as if the forecasts are more in line with what the HER model shows, the high resolution model I showed you at the very end, as opposed to the European, which shows more snow or more rain. So I assume that if the model holds for areas like Michigan, northern Indiana there, and into northwest Ohio, I should say, there could be that, again, threat for potentially up to 6 inches of snow, probably closer to 4 to 5, assuming it's a wet, heavy snow. And yeah, that's basically it for today's video. I just wanted to give you a quick update on that. The cold air will move out of here very quickly. It will be pretty much gone from the eastern United States by the time we get into the midweek next week, and we have a much warmer pattern shaping up. That heat wave that I earlier showed you across the northwestern United States will be moving into the rest of the United States. Not fully, but for the most part, as the extreme northern areas will continue to see a northwest flow. Long range, as you can see, I pulled up a picture here, looks pretty interesting with continued snow and cold, probably once we get past the second half of November, as again, in the meantime, probably a little bit of warmth. Alright, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next episode. Take care.